Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. Today I want to talk about shell voicings and harmonic weight. How many notes do you really need in that chord? Let's jump in. I'm going to answer my question. 2. Let me show you. So, you know that in any diatonic system, there are triads on every note of the scale. C triad, D, it's D minor, E minor, it's always minor on the third step of the major scale, fourth step of the scale major, fifth major, sixth the minor, and then the seventh is a diminished triad, and eventually, when we talk about sevenths, we'll see a little bit more about that. Well, the important note in those three notes is definitely the middle one. The third tells us whether the triad is major or minor. Let's go on. To really understand how a chord is going to work, we'll want to add another third on the top. That's the seventh. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, a very special chord, major 3rd, minor 7th, A minor 7, and then on the 7th degree, B minor 7, flat 5, or we might say half diminished. Each of those tones has a root, a third, a fifth, and a 7th. Well, what's a shell voicing? I think to show you what I'll do is I'll give you a really simple kind of old school jazz chord progression. D minor 7 is the 2 chord. G7 is the 5 chord, the 5-7 chord. C major 7 is the 1 chord. And then I'm going to add A7. And A7 is a turnaround chord that's not in the key, but A7 is the 5 of D minor. And so now we have a chord cycle. I'll play it up an octave. It's a little bit easier to view up here. D minor 7, and then an inverted G7, C major 7, and then an inverted A7. Those are solid voicings. Just to look at them closely, the first appears as a root position. The second appears over its fifth, which we call the second inversion. The C appears as a root position, and then the A appears over its third. We call the first inversion of the chord. Well, in that chord cycle, the really important notes are the thirds and the sevenths. The thirds and the sevenths give us all the information we need to understand what's happening. I'm going to play that with roots. Here we go. The third tells us whether the chord is major or minor, which gives us a strong indication of its role within the scale, the key system. And the seventh gives us important information about how the chord is going to function, where it's going, what's going to happen next. In fact, dominant chords with a major third and a minor seventh are the most functional of chords. They have a big push. All right, what's a shell voicing? Well, bebop musicians and pianists of the period where suddenly scales got really complicated and extensions got layered onto the top of things, came up with this approach that was really straightforward and simple, and I'll show you what it is. So if I play a shell voicing of D minor 7, it's just D and C, and suddenly I have all this latitude, all this freedom in the melody. to add extensions and alterations without getting in the way of chord tones that the guitarist or pianist is playing. A typical shell voicing progression for me, for D minor 7, G7, C major 7, A7 might look like this. D minor 7, just the root and the 7th. G7, just the 3rd and the 7th. C major 7, the root and the 7th. And then A7, I'd probably do something like this, or maybe like that. Again, the 3rd and the 7th. Do you notice that for the dominant chords, I picked the 3rd and the 7th? That's a solid approach to the changes. As shell voicings progress, we can begin to add extensions and alterations. And that's kind of what you saw me do just there. I should probably expand that out a bit so that it's easier for you to sort of pick it apart. Simple D minor 7, turn around, and now I added a 5th, I added a tonic, a number of alterations melodically, a few in the voicings. Harmonic weight is a function of how many extra notes you add to a chord. Those extra notes may be extensions, other thirds on the top. I certainly recommend a 7th. They may be alterations to the 5th, alterations to the 9th or 11th or 13th. Those add a spicy kind of weight. If you want to leave room for melody and for your soloist to have flexibility melodically, try shell voicings. In fact, I think it's a really important question, one that Buckminster Fuller, the architect and engineer, asked. How much do your buildings weigh? Well, how much do your chords weigh? What's the weight of your harmonic language? And what's the least you can get away with? Well, I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe and ding the bell. You'll be notified when I post my next video. I'll see you next time.